and with instead of just paying the tax now and then deferring forever with real estate. And that was kind of the idea that I would get from your podcast. And I could tell the guys that were investing in real estate seem to have more of a abundance compared to a saver, because saving is great at the beginning, and then it turns into these savings have to turn into income. And ideally, I would like to have an idea of where I can spend money, but if I have to.
Welcome, millionaires and future millionaires. You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, the show where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their portfolio allocation. Now to your host, Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode number 392.
This is the podcast where everyday millionaires share the real stories behind their wealth, how they built it, what they invested in, and the missteps they encountered along the way. We're your hosts, Jason and Stacy, and we're diving into candid conversations with people who might just be your next door neighbors. Our guests will uncover how they transform modest savings into significant wealth, offer investment tips that could change your financial outlook, and share personal stories that might surprise you and inspire you. So tune in and get ready to discover how regular people like us turned aspirations into achievements. And don't worry, while we dig deep for the details, we keep it all family friendly.
Today's episode is one for the record books. Super excited to have Glenn on the podcast. He started working out at Red Lobster, which is pretty crazy. Today, he's got most of his net worth in real estate, but tells a story of going the W-2 route, working in the corporate world, and transitioning to real estate and what he does now with his real estate portfolio and continue to add units and doors, and quite a remarkable story and portfolio that he's been able to put together. As always, we're looking for new great interviewees. If you'd like to be on the show, send us an email, millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. We are approaching episode 400. Still looking for that millionaire who's worth 400 million or more. I'd like to continue that tradition if we can. And without any further delay, let's get right into the episode with Glenn.
Glenn, you want to just give us a lot of your background and what you're up to now?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on the show, Jace. A longtime listener. I've listened to every episode, and literally, it's a big contribution to the path I've been on, and I really appreciate you having me on. But I guess to start with, my story starts at Red Lobster. I worked at Red Lobster, and we making about $1,500 a month, and barely able to pay my bills. I think I actually had to move in with my parents at 23 years old. And what I ended up having, I ended up getting my real estate license and started I started real estate in 2012. So I kind of started reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and realized that you got to go where the investing's going. And I could see that the market was at a very low at 2012, and thought I should learn as much as I could. So I got a real estate license, and I started working at Red Lobster and at showing rental properties, because all the houses were already gone by the time I would go show them because of the institutional investors. So I'd have like a $150,000 to $200,000 buyer, and by the time I'd show up, they would already be under contract. So there was no competing at that point. And so I started getting into rentals and became somewhat of an expert in the area just because nobody else would do it. And I stumbled across the company, a large REIT that was buying the houses that needed the houses leased. And I ended up just starting to show their properties. They're paying about $500 to $1,000 a lease. And within the first month, I made about $15,000 in the first month. So I went from $1,500 a month to 15,000. And what I did is I just acted as if I were still working at Red Lobster, and saved every penny. I always felt like the other shoe was going to drop. I always thought they were going to just get rid of me somehow, like eliminate my job. And so I saved everything I could, paid off any car debts or anything like that. and they ended up recruiting me on. And the next month after that, I made I had all these checks coming in, and it came out to being 25,000 the next month after that. So it was like a big change of events very quickly. And I ended up working at that company for 9 years. And the way I started buying real estate is through single family homes, and I started buying my own primary residence. I bought the most affordable one in the area, usually fixer uppers, the ones that nobody else wanted, and I would fix them up and live in them. And then the way I used to look at them is my mortgage going to be cheaper than what it would cost to rent? And then I would move out of them and then rent them out and then move into another one afterwards. So over time, I accumulated like 3 or 4 properties, and really didn't make much money doing that. It was just buying them very cheap and just barely cash flowing. But what had happened was the equity that appreciated inside of them. And then I was able to, some of them I refinanced, some of them I sold. And then I started buying, what I actually originally did was I paid down one of my mortgages. And I had this idea that I had to have a mortgage $500 a month. So what I did is I paid it down. I had a super low interest rate, probably 2.5%. And I paid it down, and instead of refinancing it, what we did is we recasted the mortgage and stretched the loan back out to, like, say, instead of 30 years, we actually did like 29 years, because it took me a year to pay it down. And then my mortgage was $500 a month. And then I moved out of that one. And then it was really my first rental that actually paid me income, and I paid me about $1,000 a month. And once you start receiving those rent checks, it just changes your life, because you're like, it almost is like free money every month. It's like, where did this $1,000 come from? It's like, oh yeah, this rental property. And I came across a good friend of mine that was buying mobile home parks, and he had about 600 to 1,000 units at the time. And I ended up buying 2 parks off of him, a 3-unit and a 9-unit, seller financed. And I put very little down, 10 to 25,000. And once I did that, it actually uh, paid all my overhead, like and my whole mindset changed. My risk tolerance changed, everything. Once my overhead was covered, my risk tolerance changed to where now no longer do I need my W-2. I have all this extra income from my W-2 to invest. And within 3 months, or within 6 months to a year of that, I ended up leaving my W-2, and we started buying real estate and finding investors to invest with us along the way.
Wow, man, what a journey! So before we get into all the details around this, because you've been a long time listener, listening to all 378 episodes or whatever, 380 episodes. So what's your net worth today?
I guess it depends on mobile home values, but I would say I'd probably be around 2.5 to 3 million.
Nice. And what is the breakup? Is it all real estate at this point?
Yes, I actually had a decent amount. What I did is I was maxing out my 401k every year, and once I decided to stop doing that is when my income started changing. I started investing in income producing assets, and I was able to pretty much escape the rat race fairly quickly when I stopped investing in my 401k. And then through leaving my W-2, I started unraveling my 401k, uh, taking the penalty. And during the CARES Act, I was able to dodge that a little bit, and really unwinded about $300,000 of my 401k and IRAs and invested into real estate.
So you self-directed that at that point?
I took the penalty. I just cashed it out.
Oh, wow. So you just cashed it out and took the penalty.
Yeah. I mean, there's some benefits, obviously, to when you do self-directed, you're not able to take the income. You have to reinvest it. And what I ended up doing is pulling the money. I needed the income, so I figured I would rather pay the penalty today and receive the income than to keep it in some kind of money jail, to not be able to use any of the money. And in real estate, you always need the money. And also another thing I used was the CARES Act worked out into my favor because I didn't have to pay the penalty, and I was able to pay the taxes off over 3 years. And the other thing that helped in mobile home parks, they're very high depreciating assets. So I was able to do some cost seg studies to offset the income, and I pretty much didn't have to show the income because of the depreciation that I was receiving on the mobile home parks.
Wow. And when did you end up leaving your job?
I left. Started in 2022. I left in 2022.
Okay, so you've been at this now for a couple years full time.
Yes.
Okay. And at the time that you cashed in, were you still working or did you do that kind of as you exited?
Yeah. So I looked into there's self-directed IRAs, and then there's like solo 401ks. And what I learned about the self-directed IRAs, and this isn't tax advice, this is just the information that I know, and very limited, I would say. But I'm not I'm not an accountant. But what I know is through the self-directed IRAs, when you invest in something with leverage, you actually are still taxed on the percentage of leverage that you have on the asset. And with solo 401ks, you do not have that. It's called a UBIT tax, I'm told, with the self-directed IRA. So I actually rolled 80,000 into a solo 401k, and it kind of gave me anxiety to like know that I had to manage this myself, and I had to check with some guys, fiduciaries, or not fiduciaries, but the custodians.
Picture this. You're running a business and suddenly you realize you need to hire somebody yesterday. The pressure's on and the time is ticking. So, how do you find top talent fast? The answer is simple Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. I do it all the time. With sponsored job ads, your post stands out, jumping to the top of search results for the candidates you actually want to reach. And here's the best part it works. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs get 45% more applications than non sponsored ones. Plus, there are no monthly subscriptions or long term contracts. You only pay for results. I love how fast and efficient Indeed makes hiring. When I think about past experiences where finding the right candidate took forever, I wish I had Indeed back then. With their tools, hiring is fast, stress-free, and focused on results. Ready to speed up your hiring process? While I've been talking to you, 23 hires have already been made on Indeed worldwide. Don't wait. Get started now. Listeners of this show get a 75% sponsored job credit to make your job post stand out. Visit Indeed.com/unveiled and tell them you heard it here. That's Indeed.com/unveiled. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need.
And within like 1 month of having that solo 401k, I just pulled it out. And it just happened to be during COVID. And the CARES Act, pretty much protected me from the 10% penalty that I was paying on it. So that was kind of how I started. And then after the fact, whenever I became self-employed in 2022, which made me a full-time real estate professional, I was able to utilize the cost seg studies to offset the 401ks, the earned income is really what I was doing.
Sweet. So at this point, I mean, all real estate, where do you go from here? Do you have a target net worth? Is it you going to continue to double down on real estate and real estate investments over time, or do you plan to deviate from that at all?
I really like, we have a business. We pretty much raise money for real estate. We invest in real estate, and I would say that it's not so much a net worth thing that I'm looking at, is more of an income, because in the end, and the main reason why I kind of left the 401k world or the IRA is that in the end, when I'm 65 years old, I'm going to have to figure out a way to create this into an income approach. And the way I looked at it is that why would I have this discipline to stay on track, put it into a 401k, save into put it into equities or self-directed, to later change my plan after 30 years of a muscle that I've been, working out, is that saving muscle, put it into a 401k. Now I have to change my whole investment approach. So I look at it and said, well, how do I retire sooner or get out of the rat race sooner? Is I focus on the income immediately. So that's kind of what I've changed my approach to. And that's kind of whenever I listen to this podcast, the guys that were living an abundant life were the guys that were not too concerned about the 401k. Like when you would actually talk about the net worth, they were like, somewhere between like 5 and 20 million. And it's because these guys are looking at the income, and they can spend money because they have a predictable type of income. And that's what I focus on, is income approach.
And are you mainly trying to find things in your area, or are you going nationwide, or what does that look like for you now?
Yeah, so we buy mobile home parks that are in pretty bad shape. So it's kind of hands-on, and we have 3 or 4 construction crews that work regularly. So that's why we try to stay local to the central market, Central Florida. I think also the other thing that we think about is we have young kids, me and my business partner. My kids are 3 and 5 years old. So getting on a plane to go look at a mobile home park doesn't really it's a time commitment. So I look at that as just like I like to be home for dinner and be home to pick up my kids from school. So as long as I'm close by, I can go look at a mobile home park or a apartment complex and still make it home for dinner, or to be able to pick them up from school. So that's the main focus for now. But I would imagine once we get to a certain size, we would venture out. But until then, we like to stay local.
Cool. So are all these properties, would you say, within an hour drive of your house?
Yeah. It's
Wow.
about 575 units.
Wow. Good for you. So I want to go back to a few things that we had discussed a little bit before the show happened, and one, that you have listened to all these episodes and it changed your trajectory and whatnot. So if you don't mind diving into to when you started listening to the show, what your net worth was, and then what has changed from a trajectory standpoint of what you've done in the years that you've been listening.
Yeah. So like I said, I would say my net worth was around 600 to 800,000, and I will most of it. I would say it was about 50-50 in real estate equity, as in single family houses, and the other half was in my 401k and IRAs, and I would max out all of them: HSAs, uh, 401ks, and the IRAs, and mine and my wife's. And it was at a point where she was like, her administrator at her work was asking her, she's not getting a paycheck because the 100% of it was going into 401ks. And that they're like, "Are you sure this is what you want to do?" And she's like, "Yeah, that's what I want to do." And so we were aggressively maxing out. She maxed hers out with her income was about 30 to 40,000, and she would max out her IRAs or 401ks, and we'd put them into Roth 401ks and everything. But when I would listen to your podcast, it would be like the question, or you would have people that were you would ask questions. The one question you would ask is, what happens at requirement? Like, say if we were to stay on that path and just consistently do 401ks, the requirement minimum distribution, we would be forced to pay all these taxes. And the good thing about real estate is it's pretty tax favorable, and you can ideally, defer them indefinitely is the goal. And so the whole paying taxes, you're really paying your taxes when you're trying to receive income in your 70s, and with instead of just paying the tax now and then deferring forever with real estate. And that was kind of the idea that I would get from your podcast. And I could tell the guys that were investing in real estate seem to have more of a abundance compared to a saver, because saving is great at the beginning, and then it turns into these savings have to turn into income. And, ideally, I would like to have an idea of where I can spend money. But if I have to project it on like a 4% withdrawal, it just didn't seem like something that was like, it's like if I spend 4% on $1 million this year, and say if the stock drops 20 to 30%, I had to spend 4% on 700,000. It's like that just doesn't seem right. I mean, because you're changing your lifestyle instead of just having a set standard of this is my income and this is what comes in and this is what I can spend. And that's kind of what I got out of the podcast.
It's interesting you mention kind of that safe withdrawal rate and just the psychology of that a little bit, because it is something that I've been trying to ask a lot of guests on, especially those that are, kind of at that age of retirement age, because it has been, from a theme standpoint, one of those things that's been more difficult, I think, for people to adopt. And as you mentioned, kind of having that saver mindset, or that, I'm putting this away. It's really difficult to shift from, not having quote unquote a paycheck or an income, that now you've got to spend down, some of your asset value. And if your asset value is, and it's not one way wrong or another, it's just kind of, if you go that strategy and you've got everything in the market, for say, you basically built up this nest egg and now you've got to pull down from it. And people struggle with that in general, and trying to adapt to that change and feeling like they aren't going to run out of money. And then on the flip side, you have people that in some cases may buy, a business or real estate or whatever and have that income stream. But then sometimes it's very difficult to go liquidate, those assets in some respects. And, you may have that income stream, but now you want to have more of a stockpile of cash or whatever. And that also becomes a challenge for some people, depending on their age, to, well, hey, I'd rather not have 20 properties. I'd rather scale back, not be so involved in it, or I do need to sell off because of family planning or whatever it might be, and whatnot. So at this point, given the trajectory you've been on, I mean, do you foresee hitting a certain kind of passive income or income goal or target out there as you continue to acquire? Or is there, I know you talked a little bit about having the lifestyle and having, kind of the ability to be home for dinner and have small kids. Is there a point where it kind of like, hey, I've won the game and I probably won't, look to grow beyond, X, as long as my lifestyle can stay Y?
Yeah. So I've already I have like a certain retirement approach that for me, and that works. And I could tell you from my experience with knowing a lot of real estate investors, the happiest real estate investors I've ever come across, and with the most well-balanced lives, because you can see all sorts of people that, they might have these 6,000 square foot houses and nobody to live in it with them. Those types of investors. And then you have the guys that have like good family lives, and they have time to meet up with you and stuff like that. And the ones that were that to me looked like the most successful in that aspect were lenders. They're private money lenders. And I've already started a little bit of I have about $500,000 in private lending, and that is, I would say, is my retirement approach, because with that, it's as close as you can get to mailbox money, and
Ever feel like you're running on empty, burned out, unfocused, and just surviving the day? Trust me, with 5 kids and twins, I've been there. What if I told you there's a way to invest in your mental wealth, just like you invest in your financial future? Mental wealth is about building habits today that make you resilient for tomorrow. And that's where Magic Mind comes in. Their focus shots help me stay clear, sharp, and productive all day without the caffeine rush. And their sleep shots, a total game changer. They help me wind down at night, so I wake up refreshed and ready to tackle the day. For the first time ever, Magic Mind has bundled their focus and sleep shots into a 24-hour mental performance pack. And right now, you can get it for 45% off, exclusive to my listeners. Just head to magicmind.com/unveiled, JAN. That's magicmind.com/unveiled, JAN. So this January, take the mental wealth challenge and make 2025 your best year yet. better focus, better sleep, and a better you. Go to magicmind.com, unveiled Jan, and start building your mental wealth today.
And that's kind of over time. I think that's the long-term path, is rolling out some equity play of my real estate or some cash outs, and start rolling them into first lien position notes. They pay, some of them pay between 12 and 15%. So as long as you structure them correctly, they're pretty safe overall.
Cool. So do you plan to ever liquidate some of the mobile home parks to do some of that private lending, or is it more so over time you'll just start to kind of build up both?
Yeah, I think it's build up both. I think the good thing, a lot of people are against getting large, but I think the larger you get, the easier it is to manage, because you can hire qualified people. And say, like, when we're at 200 units, we could barely pay for a property manager, a full-time property manager. When you get to 575 units, you can actually have a very qualified property manager work for you. And that person will be able to handle a lot of the headaches that most people are worried about. And I would say when you get to 1,000 to 2,000 units, you can hire a CFO or an asset manager that would help manage a lot of the other headaches that come with owning that much real estate. So it becomes easier, and you can hire more qualified people the bigger you get. So ideally, we get larger, and to have more qualified people work for us to make it more passive for myself.
Cool. Well, awesome. What's been kind of a crazy learning that you have, or just the psychology of going from a W-2 to full time, whether it's real estate investing or entrepreneurship, I feel like is something that's drastic for some people, and I'm just curious, if you don't mind sharing what enabled you to do that. Was it basically that income metric that made it so you had that nut covered, or was there something else? And walk us through the psychology of making that switch. It's super fresh for you, a couple of years.
Yeah, so I think there's one thing that I have learned over time, and it's a lot of people say when you're younger you should be riskier, and it actually, I think, is kind of flipped for me. Is if I were to have invested into less risky things that were more of an income approach, I could later on, the income approach made it to where once I had enough income from these investments, it made it to where I could take on more risk. And that was the one thing, because I mean, I've lost money through, uh, I bought credit card debt that was like, I didn't know anything about it. I put $17,000 into it, and I ended up getting about $6,000 back. Letting somebody else try to collect on the credit card debt doesn't work, at least for me. I know there's people that are successful doing it, but I was not. I wasn't willing to put the time in, and I lost $10,000 from doing that. And I'm thinking, I need to get out of this. You're driven to get out of this W-2 that you're getting. You're like, for me, I was in somewhat of a niche, so I couldn't actually like jump jobs or anything like that. I was kind of like feeling trapped, because I have no college background. And I thought, if I lose this job, I'll be pretty much out on the street, is what I thought to myself. That was what my mind would tell me. And so investing into, it's actually the most riskiest time, is whenever I have a, a W-2 that is the only bill that pays or the only income that pays my bills. So what I have to do is diversify my risky position in my W-2 to buy income producing assets, so I can no longer need this risky, rely on my risky asset, which is my W-2 income. So once I get out of that aspect of it, the W-2 income is great. It's probably, it paid me very well. But it was only, it could have been CEO's idea that they were paying me too much, and they could have just gotten rid of me within just a phone call. This guy gets paid too much. We need to lower the cost and reduce my income. So it's good to just see it as my income from my W-2 is risky, and my investments outside of my income shouldn't be as risky. And then once that income actually became high enough, I could leverage my W-2 to really take on more risk after that. So
Awesome. Well, let's wrap up with some rapid fire questions. What's the most expensive pair of shoes or pants that you purchased?
I buy the same pair of jeans almost. I go to Nordstrom Rack and get my $50 pair of jeans. I think they've gone up to $60 recently. So it's about, I buy almost the same pair every time I go. And shoes is, I hate it, but it's between 80 or $100 when I buy shoes. And I think I might have spent 110 on some Nike Shox when I was younger.
Nice. What about the most expensive car that you've purchased?
I would say it's a Honda Pilot for the family. It was about out the door is about 45,000.
Okay. What about the most expensive trip or experience?
I think I just went on it. I didn't know I was going to spend this much, but it was at a resort in the Keys, and it came out to being about 3,000. It was about $3,000 for 3 days. It was just a wedding, uh, a getaway wedding, and I went there. The hotel was like 500, but after it was all said and done, everything was just so expensive, and it was just like that got out of hand really quick. But it was about $3,000.
Okay. What about the most expensive meal out?
I think it was. I think I spent about $600, $650 on a steak dinner, handful of people. It was actually for my birthday, but I bought it. I don't know why I did it. I just bought it just because I didn't want anybody to think about it. I was like, I'll just pay for it, and this is a $650 meal.
Okay. What's still on the bucket list that you haven't done yet?
Let's see. I've never been to Europe, and I'd like to eventually get out there soon.
Okay. What was your first job?
Uh, my first like 3 or 4 jobs was dishwashing. It was a calling for me, I guess. I thought I could only be a dishwasher, so I just started one after another. I was 13 years old when I started, though.
And this was before Red Lobster?
Oh yeah, Red Lobster. I was a server. I've moved up in the ranks to a server.
And was dishwashing how you made your first buck too?
I think so. Yeah, I would say I was getting paid under the table and just I would buy video games with the money. There was no need to work. I just bought video games with it.
That's awesome. What was your favorite video game at the time? Do you remember?
Oh, geez, I don't know. It's probably like Tony Hawk or something. I played a lot of Tony Hawk and Halo later.
Okay. What's a key lesson you learned from childhood?
My parents, they were extremely hard workers, and my dad would always be home for dinner, and he would pick us up from school, and although they were not exactly really good with money, they showed me how to work.
What what financial habit has changed the most, or even just habit in general, since you became a millionaire?
It kind of goes back to it. It's one of those things where just focusing on income and then knowing what I'm investing in. As in, before I would buy like uh, leverage stocks and just look at my phone until I saw it go up a little bit to sell it. And for me, I just like to focus on income, and I have learned that I only buy income producing assets.
Nice. What's the dumbest thing that you've ever wasted money on?
Whew, there's a lot. Uh, I would say that I've been sober for 14 years, but I drank a lot and I spent a lot of money on alcohol. So that would probably have to be the dumbest, but it kind of got me to where I am today, I guess.
Okay. What's something that you spent way too much money on but don't regret?
Let's see. That's a tough question. I don't. I guess it's really. I enjoyed investing, and I probably put in too much at times, and I overcommit or I underestimate the budget. But it's always worked out to my favor, so it's forced me to spend. So I always, I love buying real estate. It's what I love to do for fun.
Okay. What's the craziest thing that you ever done to earn money?
Uh, this is it's a tough one. I don't. I mean, I'm pretty a vanilla guy. I would say that whatever in the past wouldn't be able to say on the podcast. So
Legal or not legal?
I would say that there's a reason why I don't drink today, and I would say that there's many things that I should not ever do. So
Okay, all right, that's fair.
it's literally the only thing I could think of, and I don't even want to say it on air. So
Okay, what's a closely held belief that you once had that you recently changed your mind on?
I actually have convinced many people to put their money in a 401k, and I would tell you that, and also that to not buy whole life insurance. And I have completely flipped that, and I believe 100% that whole life insurance is a great way to start to put your money and over time. And 401k is a very risky way to invest. It's locking up your money to later. If you need the money, you're going to be in a lot of trouble because you're not going to have the money. So you need the money. You pull the money out, and you are forced to pay taxes on it when you don't have the money. So it's a very risky way to save your money. And I've actually convinced a lot of people to put their money in their 401k, and I actually don't think it's the best way. And the thing with the whole life insurance and structuring it correctly is that you are protecting your family from something terrible happening, and also you're bridging your wealth to if I were something that were to happen to me, it would turn into my wife would not have to go find somebody else to supplement my income. She would actually have life insurance to pay for her needs and also the housing that she lives in.
Awesome. Any last pieces of advice for somebody who's just starting out on their journey?
I would say that podcasts are a huge deal for me. I've learned a lot from them. I love podcasts. This one specifically, I don't miss an episode. I still get something out of all of them. And I would say that for me, I would say just to really focus on raising your income through investing in yourself or into other income producing assets.
All right, Glenn, you told me you stole a few ideas from the podcast, but one you haven't shared yet. What is that?
Yeah. Really, I love the podcast, and I feel I get a lot of content from listening to this one, and from listening to you, it encouraged me to start my own podcast. That podcast is called Millionaire Journey, and we just talk to mainly real estate entrepreneurs, and that's really what we go over. And it might not even have a topic. I don't even stay on topic most of the time. I just start asking questions that are interested to me, and I'm just hoping that people listen later.
Nice, that's awesome. Awesome. It's Glenn with a net worth of $2.5 to $3 million. Thanks for the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Jace Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website, millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.